Thanks, Stan. I'm joined on the phone now by Dr. Eric Plasker. Dr. Plasker, welcome to InFocus.
My pleasure.
So we know people are living longer lives, but when I hear that, I can never help but ask myself, what about their quality of lives? Are people actually living longer, healthier lives?
Well, you know, that's a very interesting question and a very important point, because the answer is yes, they're living longer, and some are living with quality and some are not.
So much of aging is based on lifestyle choices and not genetics, but with us being more overworked, more overstressed, even more overweight, it almost seems like that doesn't actually work out. So how do you explain that?
Well, you know, it's interesting that you say that, because I think a lot of people do have that perception, but the reality of it is that I wonder what the actual longevity potential would be if we didn't live our lives that way. It's funny, I heard a great story about a woman who, I think it was 114 she lived to, and they said, you know, what's the secret to your incredible longevity? And she said, well, I stopped smoking at 91. Well, I wonder what her quality of life and longevity would have been like if she never smoked at all. And I wonder what the quality of life and longevity potential would be if people just lived good, healthy lifestyles that were conducive to not just healthy lives today, but would also at the same time be conducive to quality of life as people age.
Describe how people are approaching aging these days as compared to maybe how our grandparents or even our great-grandparents did.
Oh, I love that, because, you know, we've all heard the expression by now that 60 is the new 40 and 80 is the new 60 and 100 is the new 60. And I think there is a lot of truth to that. One of my favorite things when I researched the 100-year lifestyle was that people, today's group of 100-year-old people, which, by the way, is the world's fastest-growing segment of the population. 100-year-old people are by far the world's fastest-growing group. And what's interesting is that this group, none of them planned to get here. It's not like they had a grand strategic plan. In actuality, just the opposite is true. I think the only one that had a plan was Jack LaLanne, and his quality is amazing. Most people did not have a plan to get there. In fact, when they were born 100 years ago, their life expectancy, do you know what it was 100 years ago when they were born?
I have no idea.
It was 50.
Wow.
So this, yeah, that's a big wow. And so this is a generation of people that is literally outliving their life expectancy of what science said they were going to live. They're outliving their life expectancy by a staggering 5 decades. So we look at this generation, and for many of them who are suffering, we look at them as their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren and say, wow, you know, I don't know if I want to live that long because I don't want to be like that. But what we've learned from the 100-year lifestyle is that this group is not like that or suffering with their age. They're not like that because of their age. For many of them and most of them, they're like that because they were blindsided by their longevity. They had no clue they were going to live this long, so they didn't know how to take care of themselves to ensure an active, healthy quality of life for all of those years.
Thanks, Dr. Plasker. We'll have more with you later in the program. Back to you, Stan.
Thanks, Sarah. I want to ask a question that bases itself off of what Dr. Plasker just said, and we'll start with you, Dr. Simon, and come back this way. Do you think that people's attitudes are changing as one generation passes and the other takes its place as among the most elderly in the country in terms of what they expect from their care, what they expect from the twilight years of their lives?
I think definitely the expectations change as you see the generation before you living a different kind of life, and you are also understanding that the longevity has increased, and so you are expecting to live these years longer. Retirement expectations change. What you're planning to do, second careers, as Carrie mentioned, change. So I think all these are changing with the times.
And Brooke, you were saying before the show that you had heard from someone who wanted to build a house at Meadowood because they had a view of what they wanted their retirement to be like, and they wanted to fulfill that.
Exactly. I've had contact with someone recently who wanted to build a home. They wanted to have, you know, a gym in the home, and all of these certain specifications specific to what their goals were as a couple for aging, and they trended on the younger side, and I asked them what they wanted out of coming into a retirement community with regard to these goals, because they could certainly build this home in a subdivision around town. And he said that he was really interested in a campus community. He really wanted the support of the opportunity for a health center in the event that, as aging did occur and his care needs change, that he had that on campus. And so in that way, people are thinking through all the steps of that process, I think.
Carrie, you were saying earlier that the numbers show that people want to stay home as long as possible. Has that changed at all as we get from, you know, the greatest generation to the baby boomers to, you know, some years from now, Gen X? Do you think that that's going to change at all?
I think that possibly will change. I think that what we're looking at right now, and it's, you know, if you talk about the greatest generation, we're now moving to the largest generation. This is a group, that is just now hitting their 60s. Back in the 60s, they changed the world, and now they're in their 60s and they're going to do it all over again. As we look at, we have a sort of a little demonstration senior center at the Area Agency on Aging out in Ellettsville called the Enright Center. And it's basically, it's a fitness center. It's pretty much a bingo-free zone. And it is run by one director and 136 volunteers. Wow. And these volunteers basically have that thing programmed from 8 o'clock until 4:30 every single day. They know exactly what they want. It's all free. Anyone who's, you know, 50 years or older in Monroe or Owen County is welcome to come there. It's run totally by donations and pretty much totally by volunteers. They have built a community. They've built a community around the concept of retirement. That is what they have in common. They're all seniors, and they know exactly what they've increased connectivity to that community through bus routes, through ride sharing, through invitations. They teach people to connect to their grandchildren through Facebook, usually, at that center. I guess what I'm seeing as these baby boomers age, I'm seeing a very, very different look and much more active look to retirement.
It's interesting.
And it doesn't matter what income bracket they're in.
Well, that's interesting. You also mentioned things like ride sharing and volunteering and things that directly relate to cost of living and cost of what it is that you're doing. I want to ask you and then go down the panel quickly. Do we have the ability, and will we have the ability going forward, to retire based on the way the current money structures work with, you know, 401k plans, with the healthcare overhaul, which we can talk about a little bit more. But I mean, can we afford to live lives to 100 years old, as Dr. Plasker is talking about? Well,
it doesn't take a mathematical genius to figure out that, you know, the baby boomer generation is very different than the greatest generation. We don't have pensions. We don't have pensions. You know, we have, you know, maybe a little bit of IRA or 401k money in general. You know, we are going to be more dependent, much more dependent on Social Security, and we're going to be much more dependent on Medicare and Medicaid than the generation that went before us. There are an awful lot of really nice facilities available, retirement communities. They tend to be very expensive. The types of folks that we tend to work with at the Area 10 agency are more middle class and maybe even a little, you know, a little below that. And those are the folks that don't have the resources for a Meadowwood. You know, they really don't, and they never will. They're not going to call up a retirement community and say, I want to build a 3,500 square foot home, and it's going to be my retirement dream. And that's the vast majority of Americans. So in answer to your question, no, we have promised a level of commitment as a society that we cannot provide. These people and our communities really need to come to terms with this and come up with alternative ways of delivering service based on volunteerism and working together as a group, and balance those needs in such a way that people have really their most basic needs met.
I want to get quick responses from the two of you in just a minute, but right now we need to run back over to Sarah, who's still on the line with Dr. Plasker. Sarah?
Thanks, Stan.